Welcome to Venus Consciousness and my live Wednesdays with Venus. I started and then stopped, but here we are again. I'm not sure what happened. And welcome to anyone who is here viewing me live or anyone who will be showing up in a little while. And I see Lumi has joined. Thank you, Lumi, because always nice to have someone join me. And I know that others watch after. So for all those who are watching this in the future, according to my belief system, there really is no future or past, even though it very much feels that way in this human body of ours. Hello, David. Welcome. And thank you for joining me here. And I guess what I'll say is, yeah, saying hello to all those in the future and all those present, my two friends, Lumi and David, who are here joining me. And we can have a little chat about what it means to show up for yourself in this world where we are encouraged, actively encouraged, to do the opposite. And I think that what I decided that I had wanted to start with, and just chime in if you can't hear me, because it does sometimes happen that I'm talking and can't be heard, but I'm pretty sure I'm all plugged in and ready to go and can be seen and heard. But anyway, what I wanted to talk about, what I was thinking about talking about, so I just posted a post called The Reptilian Takeover that no one's talking about. And in this post, I feel like I sort of revealed more of myself, or at least more of the part of myself that is very much connected to my spirituality and my belief system than maybe I have in the past. And in doing so, I feel like it was a big step forward in my personal evolution and circling back to this, what it means to show up for yourself on a healing journey. And I think that those of us that are here on Substack, we are showing up, or those online in general that are putting themselves forward in a way, but specifically here on Substack, those of us that have chosen to show up and to do something real, to be real for who you are in your own becoming, and to in that way sort of share your gifts. And also, what I was saying before is showing up in a world that encourages you to do the opposite, meaning we are encouraged to stay frozen, stay in a place of welcome, John, in a place of sort of that freeze brain, like the powers that be that I went into in my last post, which for me, I sort of wanted to dive right back into that place, because after I posted it, I was like, I tend to, I don't want to, on the one hand, I don't want to be too out there, too woo woo that people can't relate. And on the other side of the token, I'm always telling others and myself, like, what is your story? Only you have your perspective. Only you have your unique skill set, what you survived, what you know about how your brain's wired, the combination of your biology, your spirit shining through your human form and your biology and your environment, and what that mixture created for you is a one in a one in infinity. You are an infinitely unique and beautiful being. And so, what is it that you can share? And we're all encouraged to stay silent and to stay in a consumption mode, giving our power away, because then we're easy to be controlled, and it's easy to for the powers that be to sort of do what it is they do. And so showing up for yourself and learning how to put yourself out there, and maybe it's not even putting yourself out there, but maybe it involves, the first step is healing and being with the parts that are broken, and then learning how to articulate and share and put yourself out on the line, whether it's with a few friends, family members, loved ones, in an intimate partnership, or as you begin to be on a platform like Substack, where you are beginning to share your wisdom, because everyone has wisdom. And it's this big, giant misconception that you're just that our life is here to, get a job, grow up, go to school, get a job, and retire, then die. Like that's feeding the wheel. But actually, we're divine creators, and we came to be here not only to learn lessons, but to create something bigger, to create not only this learning for ourselves, but to have an impact. And an impact really is not in the way that we would be told is an impact. Okay, so this idea of external validation. Like, yes, I was writing about this. We all want recognition, but impact is really the thing that happens between you and yourself, and you and those in your direct environment. And it has always been about quality and not about quantity. And for those of you who follow my work, I often follow other channelers that are psychic or clairvoyant, which are, I've been talking about some of the gifts that have come online for me that I've been developing. And with my last post, I feel like I am beginning to step into that person that I am, sort of admit it. At first, even when I was writing the post, I was afraid because while I've talked about, welcome, Manpreet, I think you say your name, welcome. But while I talk about this capacity to, okay, sorry, lost my train of thought, welcoming you guys, that happens sometimes. But what I was going to say is that when we are in a place of going back to in a place of consumption where they want to keep us frozen and in consumption and on this wheel, this trajectory of go to school, grow up, maybe find a partner, have a job, retire, die. And it's like, yes, those are some of the milestones, but the whole purpose of being a human is to come learn your lessons and also creatively make something new from this unique person that you are, with your biology, with your spirit soul coming through, and with the environment you're raised in. You get to take that and you get to be the mad chemist in your own shop of what are you going to create? What is David, John, Manpreet, Lumi, Venus, what are we going to create with this unique um beautiful gift of experience? And most of us, because we are in this world where we're being bombarded with all of the programming to forget, to stay disempowered, we're navigating trauma, we're navigating a brain that's foggy because of the chemicals, because of the screens, the artificial lights, the food sources being, everything being taken away to keep us in a place of survival. And that was what my whole article was about, is being locked into the hindbrain, because when you are, you're easy to control. But the whole point of being a human is to be in a using all parts of your brain, mostly the frontal brain, which is the frontal lobes, prefrontal cortex, which is part of what makes us uniquely human compared to the mammals, compared to the reptilians. That's what we're not supposed to, the third eye, which is the seat, according to ancient philosophers, of the soul. And that's what I'm talking about, that I'm getting back to before I got distracted, getting back into what I am stepping into, and what I believe any of us can step into, is that it's our birthright. It's your birthright to have this, like Einstein talked about, that knowledge is limited, but imagination can incorporate the whole world. And what I believe he was pointing to is that genius of Einstein. He was also very childlike. He was also neurodivergent. He was also highly sensitive. He was one of us. He's like a Substackian. If Substack was existing during the time of Einstein, we'd be all best buds with him. He'd be on here writing because, like, we are that type of human. We are the type of human that is courageous enough to speak the truth, to look for the truth, to do the healing work, instead of just become, masked and fragmented and sort of going through the motions. And it's not that we are not don't have masks, and we haven't also gone through our own fragmentation, but what sets us apart is somehow this unique combination. We didn't get destroyed by this system that wanted to essentially ensnare us. And they didn't have to, what I said in my article, although many are literally imprisoned, the majority of the human race that isn't imprisoned, and way too many are, that's a whole nother topic. The systems of how imprisonment continues and slavery continues to this day. But we're all enslaved. And that was the thing, as I was beginning to wake up, I was like, I really resonate with people who are oppressed. And why? Well, I had my own trauma of being a victim of childhood sexual abuse, which does create its own oppression. But also, now that I've posted this article a few days ago, realizing, no, it's because all of humanity is oppressed. And it's almost like I've been dancing around it. I've been waking up in the visions I have, because as I was mentioning, I've always been had these psychic capacities, but they really started to come online when Finn died. And now, after posting this article, I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to start talking more from that place. Why am I afraid of being judged? Well, I've had past life memories of being burned at the stake, decapitated, driven out of villages, in hiding and for my life because of the knowledge I carry. And that sounds very woo, yes, but it's my truth. And so I'm like, I'm gonna stop. Like my daughter, when I read her the article, she's like, "Mom, you can flesh this out more. Like, you have all this wisdom. Like, why dance around it?" Well, it's this sort of cellular memory of being like, "But I'll be judged, I'll be ostracized," and then in some occasion, many occasions, and our ancestors, even if you don't believe in past lives, they have proven that DNA and cellular um, connections to our ancestry exists in a cellular level. And so you could just even say I'm picking up on my ancestors who were driven out of villages, burned at the stake, and killed for the wisdom they held. And not even talking about like the wise woman of the village type deal and the burning of witches, just all of us, since I believe we've had past lives of it, and even if you don't believe that theory, your ancestors were persecuted at some point, just like we all are now. So, like, for thousands and thousands of years, we've been oppressed, we've been persecuted, and so, of course, as you go to start to speak your truth, you are going to come up against, going back to what I said when I started this live, you're gonna bump up against resistance. And the resistance is your survival brain, a part of your brain saying either it's cellular memory coming through from your ancestors, or it's actually your own memories from other past lives. Because just a little aside with past life hypnotherapy, I happen to have had a session that sort of broke open my very first past life memory that I mentioned in that last article. And also, though, since then, I've had many more. Um, and they didn't come in hypnotherapy, they just came in different trigger moments where, like, it would bring me, or in dreams, but, like, where it would bring me to this place that reminded me of, and it was something that I wasn't thinking about, and and I could get into a whole whole 'nother subtopic of how do I decipher a vision and a memory from, like, a thought that I'm having, and I feel like that in itself, if you do go down the road of, I'm curious about what Venus is talking about," or maybe you already have had some of these experiences, but we all have the clair senses, which are basically clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience. We all have capacity to access this third eye that all the ancient religions have talked about, that is part of our own brain, the pineal gland. Some people are waking up nowadays doing plant medicine. And while I have done plant medicine, and it was actually doing an ayahuasca ceremony that I was randomly really drawn to do. I'd barely even heard of this medicine or drug medicine that they practiced that came from South America. But all of a sudden it was like in my periphery, and then I saw it online, and then I saw it again, and it was like all of a sudden I was like, I need to go do this. And there was this place that felt really safe in Costa Rica where they were a licensed facility with doctors on hand, and you meet with a psychiatrist before you do it, and they have shamans from the original villages that were trained in the original way that the indigenous used the medicine. Anyway, point being, I have done plant medicine. Ayahuasca is what, being there, not while I was there, but when I came home, is what cracked open my memories of early childhood sexual abuse, that if I wouldn't have done it, and the DMT, which is the active ingredient in ayahuasca, which they say is also an ingredient that your brain, a chemical that your brain produces, and they think is connected to the pineal, not pineal. Oh my god, my brain. Anyway, to the third eye and pineal. I'm like, can't even remember the word right now, and I just wrote about it. Anyway, point being, our brain makes this chemical. It is also found in this very specific combination that from these, like, this particular vine from the Amazon mixed with this bark that they boil down that creates ayahuasca, that allows your brain to get there. Then there are breath ceremonies, there's meditation. There are all these ways that we can access the part of our brain that is connected, that bridges us to something more. And the reason that this has been considered taboo, and that we only are taught to believe in, like, what is material, like science can prove or religion can say, because both of those systems keep us locked in to a false, what I call the false matrix, false belief system that keeps us disempowered. So now I've decided, I'm like, you know what? Circling back to what I was saying before, what are your unique gifts? What are Venus's unique gifts? Venus's unique gifts are that she always had, and in addition, the abuse in it of itself that I write about created a dissociation where I would jump up and out of my body. Um, and that all oh, I think I'm making thumbs ups and then it's showing up on my screen. Anyway, that was created a unique situation for me where I was able to cultivate a unique wisdom. And then in losing Finn and being cracked open and being drawn out of nowhere to be like, I need to do this medicine, that helped unlock memories and the whole unraveling. We each have our own story that led us to the point we are today, where the trauma cracked you open, the loss, the unraveling, that created where you are in this place of curious understanding, remembering, and so many writers are in this place, and I feel like that's who I'm speaking to, and I don't need to worry about, although I will have old fears come up, I don't need to worry about if I'm going to be judged for what I'm sharing, because I'm like, they wouldn't be listening to you if they were judging you. And I think, though, that so many of us, having grown up in families with, again, going back to this article, people that were fragmented enough to be abusers and to be, or they were, addicts or whatever it is that, and even if you had parents relatively healthy, they still had a shit ton of programming keeping them small and therefore teaching you to be small. So I feel like all of us have to overcome this like initial fear to be like, I'm going to share my story and I'm not going to be quote unquote driven out of the village because of it. Um, I think I do certain symbols and then certain things come on. The happy birthday one too. Um, that's funny. Sometimes I think of signs and I'm like, okay, well, birthday signs. Like, I just did have my birthday and I realized that there is a very specific sequence to me. Like, once I got over, which I also have written about recently, like getting older and what it means to be the wise woman, like, because, in a patriarchal world where men have been stripped of their sovereignty and so have women. That's why the suicide epidemic is largest in the male population. Because while for most of my life I was raging against men because I had subconscious, very intense wounding around what had happened to me that I didn't even remember, but I could feel it in my body having been, assaulted. It wasn't until more recently in my healing journey that I was like, men are just as ensnared by this. All of humanity is. And so, while men have been handed more of the power, especially white men, there is, even for the majority of white men and even the abusers at the top, who are often at the top or in situations of power, they also have been robbed of their sovereignty. That's why they're abusing. They are stuck in this hindbrain. They are stuck in this place of fight, flight, um, fawn, freeze, fornicate, like all of those things that keep this pattern continuing. And so I guess what I'm saying is that, like, for a long time, I was railing against men with the patriarchy and all of that. And then I realized on my healing journey, it's humanity that has, even regardless of color. And I'm not saying that that the capitalistic world and that in the last 4,000 years that, and specifically 400 years, that there wasn't this like the European, sort of takeover of all the indigenous and the systems of oppression and classism and capitalism and racism and all the things that are keeping, certain people in power. I'm not trying to discount that, but what I am saying is that all of humanity is enslaved. And that was the piece that, writing this article, I was like, you know what? Even though it's woo to be like, there are forces beyond humanity that are, a lot of these movies point to it. And the reason that it's like, oh, that's conspiracy, it's so easy to call it conspiracy because that's also a way that keeps us not believing it. Whereas when w- things like the Epstein files and how many people were involved, and you see the type of ritual satanic, like, abuse that's been happening largely all across the world, and that's only the elite practicing, but you have, all the abuse that happens all the time trickle down across any race, across any demographic, it's happening. So, like, when you begin to look at the fact that every single human is being affected, you begin to see that there has got to be something else keeping us in this place. And so I think that it's not that, like I said in my article, that I wanna just, like, go down a rabbit hole and become a conspiracist, because you see what happens in people like QAnon and with the internet and, like, going down these rabbit holes of conspiracy, you again then just start to feed the fear trap of, you start to research it, your mind starts to get, even just reading the Epstein files, like, there's a reason why certain amounts of information are released to make it, certain funnels are fed in terms of like what gets considered conspiracy, how things like the Epstein files get delivered, like dumped on the public without any accountability. The flooding is intentional. So the fear flooding, the overwhelm flooding, the media, the way the media is completely operated, and the porn industry and all of it, and the Monsanto, killing off all our seeds in the spring, like, it's all so much that it could put you into a spiral of, well, then what the fuck am I even doing? Like, we're all gonna just like, people, the billionaire baby boys are gonna like destroy us with the war industry, the war machines that, like, even that, I'm like, Democrats versus Republicans, sorry to go on a rampage, but like, they're all, you can get so, like, we're fighting over, whether people can have Medicaid, and everyone's all riled up. And then as soon as a bill comes through saying, should we give billions more for this new war that no one wants? Yes, they all vote yes. So like, it's also co-opted and hijacked the entire system, that even just beginning to talk about it, it's like, oh my God, Venus, are you really going to go there? But what I realize is I have to go there because I have, it does apply to what I do want to talk about, which is agency and sovereignty and healing. And also, the fact is, if we can begin to look at and okay ourselves with the fact that, like, a third eye exists in each one of our brains, with a gland that makes this chemical DMT, which allows us to, it's the same chemical released at birth and death. It's the same one that you can access in psychedelic states and meditative states that religions have been talking about, that allows the human to realize, like, not only am I a divine being, I can have access to the parts of me that maybe have been here before, to the parts of my soul that exist beyond this physical human body. Because once you begin to realize that, you begin to take back your power. And you can't just do it up through your mind, because when you have been oppressed, it shuts down your lower centers. When you, even if you weren't sexually abused, when you were just exposed to the porn industry, which right then and there, I had a dream about this. I didn't put it in my article, but I had a dream about, because my first husband was addicted to porn, the one that attacked me and went to prison. He was addicted to porn, and I'm not saying it's like, we have writers here. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to shame anyone if there are male viewers here or later who have been. Like, the thing is, it's so tricky, because they know, especially the male psyche is visual and sexual. Like, we have these hormones and these drives. And so when you can take the visual and the sexual and then wrap it into this thing that is making it all like a very physical, primal, drive that doesn't involve the connection of humans. It involves this like very materialistic and deadening of, like, yes, there's orgasm involved, but the orgasm is all from this purely physical place. And when you just go straight into the materialistic, straight into the physical, and you discount the emotional, the spiritual, what you're doing is, it's like the way a reptile would have sex. Like, it is the very most basic function. And when that gets elevated in all of our movies, when you see it over and over and over, this reptilian way of fucking, and it's not, elevated to like the heart center and to like the fact that you're a divine human, whether you want to exchange that with someone else or practice it on your own. There's so much shame, and then it's constantly being thrown in your face this other way of doing it, which is part of that enslavement. It's no wonder that people that are also struggling, that they turn to these things because there is this it 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 basically like it hijacks your system. So like the point is that, like, to get to this point where I am today, where I'm like, I'm gonna talk about the bigger picture of what's actually happening. I'm gonna use what I've lived through. I'm gonna use my unique soul consciousness that's way beyond this lifetime and many others, and what I survived, what it did to my being, and I'm gonna start talking about it because I'm gonna work through the fear levels of the fact that I'll be judged, or this like irrational fear that when I very first started talking about this stuff that I would be hunted and killed for this. And even at the time, like literally the very first time I started talking about being a medium with some of the parents in my kids' school, I spent a week after sharing in a group text about the fact that this mom who died suddenly, who was only 33, a parent in my kids' little homeschool initiative from the flu. And it was like out of the blue, but it really like triggered me because of having lost Finn. And then also she came to me in this really strong way the night she died and for like a period of months after, and I began to share it with the community because the community was also very open to, this type of spirituality and to being in a group and processing together. But the very first time I shared with them, I spent literally like 3 or 4 days, like, in a deep panic state of deep paranoia, which a friend later called, like, persecution paranoia, like, irrationally feeling like I was going to be hunted and killed for what I shared, and the rational part of my brain was like, "Who's gonna hunt you and who's gonna kill you?" But, like, what I'm saying is the amygdala, going back to the brain, like, trauma lives and recapitulates, so we still don't really know. Hypnotherapists, like, when they're trying, like, there are stories of people that have chronic pain, and they don't know why they have the chronic pain. They eventually go see a hypnotherapist. The hypnotherapist, um, tells stories about this, like, brings them back to a place either in their early childhood, or what a lot of hypnotherapists realize is that people were bouncing back, just like me with this past life stuff, to past lives where they're like, "Oh, I had this pain in my leg, and it was really creating, like, chronic discomfort and low self-esteem because I was in so much pain I couldn't really walk or do exercise," let's say, and then they realize they have a memory of being run over by a carriage and dying in their past life. And so it's like the more we can begin to realize that we are holding not only trauma from like what happened to us in this life, we're holding trauma from what happened to us in past lives and also what happened to our ancestors. And so it's like this compounded trauma that we have to access and heal, because otherwise what happens is, if you cannot find safety to ground in, you can't all of a sudden start speaking like I am learning to do, like, to you guys now, and writing about it, if you haven't gone through the layers of first, freeing yourself from those places of oppression, because otherwise you're just reacting. Like the earlier Venus who was, you know, got pregnant, like met him like as a rebound, my husband, the one that like tried to kill me, like that was addicted to porn that I'm talking about. And we're actually friends now because, like, anyway, he found his way after going to prison, and a lot of healthy boundaries were like set up, sorry, between us, so that um now there is, and he started a new family and like has children of his own, and my girls, my oldest two, um it's like a hard relationship because they were witness to domestic violence. So like I'm not saying everything just gets brushed under the rug, but like we have a working relationship because he also was and he's not like cured of his all of his anxiety that he also acted out because of his dad and the abuse that his dad did to his mom. Like, it's I'm not saying he's a perfect human, but I'm also not married to him, and it's not my job anymore to worry about that. But what I am saying is that, like, he's actually, done enough work that and I did enough work setting up these boundaries that there's now, like, a collaborative, neutral co-parenting for our adult teens who don't really see him anymore, but, like, you can get to that place. That is a total side tangent, but what I'm saying is that, like, okay, this is what I'm saying. The Venus who met Daniel, let's just say that. The Venus who met Daniel was, still very oppressed and not knowing why she was so oppressed, still running circuits on early sexual trauma that danger equaled intimacy, and so I was drawn to create more of that, and they say that, as a victim, specifically as a survivor of early childhood sexual abuse, you're like 40% or it's probably higher than that, 40% more likely to be in a crime, either as the abuser or as the victim. And so, even though I had no idea any of this had happened to me, I was still recapitulating trauma. And so, the trauma cycles of everyone, whether you are like Daniel, who continues the abuse, or others, or you're like me, who I was continuing to be the victim, not the perpetrator. But either way, you have these brains that have been hijacked of humanity going through lifetime after lifetime, generation after generation. And so it's a big, big thing to get to the point where you can heal that and stop being in a reactive place. And fast forward to like what happened when Finn died. At that point, after when the memories resurfaced, I then again had a choice to either bury it under the rug or to deal with realizing what actually had happened, that created all of this, to not Finn dying, but created a lot of my history of trauma. And then also getting to this point of like realizing Finn was this rock. He was the love of my life, but he died. And in his dying, I freed myself and I freed my children, because in remembering the abuse, I was able to put up a boundary to stop more abuse. So, like, when you begin to think of your life and the people that have played in your life and the players, whether it's on the global stage and you watch these politicians or you watch what's being enacted, or you see what's happened in your own personal life to get you to the point where you are today, where you're healing and willing to like start sharing about your unique wisdom and what you learned from it, that's a huge, huge undertaking to get to that point. And I was writing a note about that. Like, I see you showing up, staying soft in a world. I think the note was staying soft in a world that cuts you to the core. Like, I see you staying in this place with your raw, courageous humanity, the part that's like, that came in and was like, I'm not going to be, hey, Frankie, welcome. I'm not going to be I'm not gonna stay in this place of, continuing the cycles, and I talk so much about, like, stay being a herder, that continues the cycles, but, like, just to acknowledge for yourself what it took you to hi, to get to this place in your healing journey where you can begin to unpack the centuries and lifetimes and ancestral trauma that happened in the line that created your unique biology today. And then if you're thinking of it from where I'm starting to speak from, which is owning the fact that we have past lives and not dancing around like, "Oh, do I share that? Will I be considered too woo? Will I be judged?" And my daughter, who is very wise, being like, "Mom, this essay, like you're not really like, you need to give more details." Like, coming forward and being like, "Okay, I'm actually going to stand behind this now, because I believe it's wisdom that can help." And those that are gonna judge shouldn't really, they're not gonna be drawn to watch my stuff anyway. So this idea of like you in this unique position where you are today, you are healing not only this, biological cellular wounding from the ancestors and those before you. Aw, okay. Thanks, David, for being here. Anyway, the fact that like you are also healing many generations of your so your ancestry, but also your own soul has been through these different lifetimes. And so there's just a lot of layers to the healing that needs to happen. And when you begin to unplug from these systems by sitting in the discomfort and realizing like I was drawn to go do the ayahuasca journey, or and then later, like I said, with Finn dying, I had a choice at that point when the memories came up to either brush them out under the rug like other family members did, or deny like other family members did, or I had a choice to be like, I'm gonna move forward with this and I'm going to champion, um, my daughter, and I'm going to stand up for the truth even though it's uncomfortable, even though, I'm sure, and there are things, like in terms of the legal proceedings that I can't even get into, but like to be willing to stand in the line of fire because it's the right thing to do, to be willing to do what's uncomfortable because it's the right thing to do. In my case, it happens to be pretty extreme because that's the life that I realize I have signed up for. There has been one extreme after the other, but also in remembering all my past lives, I'm like, they've always been extreme. And if you think about, if you start to go down that path of sort of getting curious about what your past lives are, or even just researching, even if it wasn't your own life and you don't want to go down this rabbit hole of past lives, researching what happened to your ancestors. Like, it has been brutal for quite a long time now. Like this woman who wrote about what it means to live. Elaine, her name is, I forget her last name, but she wrote this beautiful Substack piece of that I based my latest article on that I'm talking about so much in this live. And she talked about like what it means to live in a motherless world, and followed it up with what it means to live in a fatherless world. And basically that like all of humanity is an orphan because of how we've been cut off from our historical roots before these systems of oppression really gained hold, and over hundreds and thousands of years to the point where we are today. But we're now, the unraveling is happening, the remembering's happening, and with that remembering and being able to come online to this part of your brain that Einstein talked about, that the mystics talked about, that allow you to name and acknowledge the fact that there is more than meets the eye to your entire experience. You begin to create bridges, not only bridges in your mind from this hindbrain fight or flight place, so that you can drop into your heart and you begin to feel embodied and safe. But you also begin this journey that is multidimensional, intergalactic, like takes you beyond what this little earth is. And it sort of reminds me of like the age of discovery. Like, it wasn't that long ago that you had people in villages being like, the earth is flat. At the end of the road where the ocean starts is probably the end of the world. And then they begin to circumnavigate the world, and they're like, whoa, there's like India all the way over on the other side. Or, when the Chinese began in the very early ancient, discoveries of this iteration of cultural epochs, and people begin to realize like, oh, it's more than just us. Like, we're having that realization as a planet, like, oh, it's more than just us. And so I think that like I have shied away from talking about this stuff, but like as of that last essay, I'm like, fuck it. I'm just going to talk about it all. And so I think that I'm still easing my way in. Like, I'll dip into a topic and then I'll go out. But I've just decided, I'm like, I follow other people that talk about this stuff and I don't judge them because I am aligned with those views. So why have I been then so afraid to step into that place in myself that is going to be the village wise woman, who I'm no longer, like I wrote in a note, like, you guys are my village and you're going to love me no matter what I say. So I don't need to be scared of being kicked out of the village anymore. That's an old story from a past life and ancestral knowledge that like that can go. And I think that you are going to have your unique version of what it means to open up this throat chakra and begin to share your truth. And mine happens to be this one, which is an intergalactic, multi, like, since time unknown, like an ancient soul that I am streaming through in this body of Venus to help awaken myself and humanity. And ultimately, I think of myself as a freedom flame. Like, I came to help free us from bondage. And so that's my personal mission. And I think that other people might have a different mission, but you getting to the point where you can begin to articulate that is the whole point. And like getting back to what I was starting to say at the beginning of this live, w- having the courage to do the excavating, to do the healing, whatever it is that helps you heal and ground and get out of the trauma flooding that keeps us in a place of reactivity. Like I was going back to the Venus when she got pregnant with her first daughter was very much in a place of just pure programming and reactivity. And it's not to say I didn't, have a year in India where like I was meditating and having like what they say kundalini awakening at 11 and 12 that like also helped me integrate the person that I have become today. But large in by and large, I was asleep to my trauma and, the dissociative amnesia, and I was reenacting, recapitulating more chapters of trauma. And then so it took me all the way up until 48, which is a time where I just had my birthday and have just posted these recent posts that I'm like, I am now in a place of enough, safety and alignment and enough healing that I am going to just, like, no holds barred. Like, we talk a lot about, like, the no more fucks to give club for a lot of women that, like, are in their 40s and 50s and beyond, and we're like, "We're done." I think that is the beauty. And again, going back to this article of the woman who wrote, she's in a really similar place to me, Elaine, that wrote that article that went viral, and therefore I saw it too, about being in a motherless and a fatherless world. But we as women who are entering this age, and men can join us too, but becoming the elder, and it's so terrifying because society, you feel invisible, has only ever showed the sexy, fertile maiden or mother version of what is an acceptable, role as a woman. And then you have some that sort of make it through and are, like, hard enough fighters to, like, get into politics or get into, like, the media industry, and they age, and they're able to still, like, hold wisdom and share wisdom, but they're very few and far between. And so I think feeling so invisible has had its own effect on me coming into, as I approach 50. But as I sort of have been on Substack and realizing that, like, right as if my life depends on it, like, all these signs telling me, like, first waking me up and then being like, "Venus, it is go time." Like, this is the year, if you follow Chinese astrology, of the fire horse. Like, the year before was the year of the snake. So much shedding for me and my family of, like, realizing what was, and the serpent, and if you think of it like the awakening of the Kundalini, but also the serpent being the poison, and me having to discover and uncover the dissociative amnesia, all of that shedding of what was keeping me small. And I remember I might have said this at one point in a live, but anyway, after I took my kids back to Costa Rica after I went and had my own, ayahuasca experience, and we just went to a different place to just, like, have a family vacation. But I remember having this, like, term come into my mind, and I made a little picture and put the quote on it and posted it on my socials at the time. But it was, "If you wish to play big, you must first heal what's making you small." And I think that I have been, that was, like, in early 2023, I believe, or maybe, yeah, 2023, summer of 2023, so coming into summer of 2026. And so I'm now at this place where I'm like, I feel like I have healed what's been making me small. Now, obviously, I'm a work in progress like you are, but as of this last, post that I wrote, I'm like, no, now I'm 48 and I'm stepping into this new era where I'm like, I'm gonna be the fire horse, and it's go time, and it's time to start sharing every little bit and to stop worrying about it. And I encourage you guys to do the same. The No More Fucks to Give Club, like, let's all join it and, like, have a party every day. So I think that, like, that sort of brings me to the conclusion of, like, also with my lives, I'll go on and I'll just, like, have an idea of what I wanna talk about. Like, I knew I wanted to circle back to this really important, love you guys, this really important article that I feel like for me represented, like, the most I've shared up until now on Substack of my spiritual gifts and of my, like, multidimensional self-healing across lifetimes, and also my theory of the harvesting and that is happening to humanity, and the enslavement and the forces that be that are beyond us that are called different things depending on what modality you're looking at, like fallen angel, reptilian consciousness, but that it's alive and well and feeding on us, and, like, not to get scared of that, but to realize, like, we are waking up anyway. We are freeing ourselves from this bondage. And if we can begin to see that instead of pitting ourselves against, like, the old white men in power, which, don't get me started how much I'm sick of them, like, of all of it. But, like, at the same time, realizing that they are also humans that are also, they became the abusers, but they are also locked into the same hindbrain that all of humanity is, that we are all, as a species, being co-opted. And so when you can sort of jump up and out of that, then you can begin to realize, like, wait, as a species, we're gonna heal, and I wanna be a part of that, and I'm gonna do my darndest to like show up every single day and to fight for all of us. And not to excuse the abuse because I'm like fighting it in a very intimate way as we speak, but like to name it and then just not stay silent and then to like start to step into your power of like what have you survived? What are you here to do? How can we change? How can we ground in? How can we form new alliances with each other so that we don't have to be afraid of being kicked out of the village? Like how can we create our new village of safety? For me, it's online because like I wrote a post just before coming on today. My circle is very small. I've become very selective of who has access to me. None of my family of origin, Finn's family, luckily, are super supportive and they've become like our adoptive family. Most of my friends I don't talk to anymore. Several really close friendships I had to walk away from, just like my family. And to me, it doesn't matter who you are to who. Like, and I talk about this a lot, like the boundary, because that's the first place. If you can't find safety, the Venus who married Daniel had to put up a boundary. Like I said, like he and I can talk now. Yeah, because the courts got involved, because he went to prison, because he didn't see us for several years. That's how come I got to heal and become safe. And I did the work continuously that I was able to protect my daughters. And then there was other abuse happening that I didn't remember. But as soon as I remembered that, I was like, no, there's a line, like pull away, pull away, pull away. And so like for me, like I said, it's been very extreme, but I'm sure that you in your own lives, for those here with me now and for those watching this in the future, have people that you can decide to put the boundary up and to say no more. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. And it also doesn't mean that you need to hate them in any way. You just can be like my famous saying, and I've talked about this in other lives, but like everyone deserves to eat, but not everyone deserves to eat at your table. And so your table begins to get really selective. And I love the table metaphor, what's ironic is the friend who told me that was a friend who I no longer talk to because we became fast and furious friends, but it was more of a trauma bond. I met her at this Jack Canfield training and and then took her on a trip to Costa Rica, and then her true colors came out, like, she was really jealous of my kids. I was, like, overextending in terms of me helping her financially, and then it became clear that she had been mirroring me in this long distance. We talk a lot on the phone, but then when push came to shove and I got to see her in person, she couldn't show up with like wanting to see me win. She just wanted to take. And that was a pattern of everyone I had known, not everyone, but so many that I had grown up with. So I was familiar with it and I was drawn to it. So again, recapitulating the trauma until you wake up. And then as you wake up, it's your responsibility. Like I always say, who's responsible for the when your hand gets bit by the biting dog? Well, the very first time, the biting dog, because it bit you and you didn't know. Every time after that, if you let that dog bite your hand, it's not your fault, but you're responsible because you're the one letting the dog continue to bite your hand. And so, um, the first part of healing for me and for what I believe our species and those of us that are willing to do the work, the highly sensitive empaths, neurodivergents that somehow um, have the courage to sit in the pain and to really tune into what it means to become sovereign and then become the leaders of tomorrow because you're sharing your story and you're helping others find their way and creating the village together. Like going back to what I was saying, like you guys are my village. You are my soul fam. You are the people that show up, that love me. And it's not that we're super close because like it's online and I might touch in briefly by reading one of your posts because I try to read them or just notes or whatever. But like we're here together. And that for me is enough because what I'm realizing is it doesn't matter whether I get to know you in person or not. What matters is that you're a soul on a similar journey, that you have a certain level of integrity that matches my level of integrity. And those are the people that get to have access to Venus. And those are the only people that should have access to you. And so yeah, love you guys. Thank you for being here and thank you for tuning in if you tune in later. And I hope you guys all have a beautiful rest of your day or evening. Peace.